The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And today we are looking forward to what's going to be happening this coming Sunday as we go into our Faith Promise weekend. There's quite a few things that are scheduled that are going to be happening. And we have with us Sabrina Westerman, who's doing a lot of the coordinating of all those events. And we also have Emmalyn Jerome, who is coming to us from Lower Lights, and she has quite a story to tell from how she grew up and everything, and we're going to learn a little bit about her faith journey and also the work she does with Lower Lights. So welcome in, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Sabrina, so I'll start with you. Kind of tell us a little bit. I know you do a lot of the coordinating for missions, so tell us a little bit about what you do here at Shepherd and how it is that you happened upon to get Emmalyn to come and share with us.
Well, it was a miracle, actually. I'm the missionary president for Shepherd Church, and we have Faith Promise once a year. And during Faith Promise weekend, we invite the people to pray and ask the Lord Jesus what he would have them to give for missions at home and abroad. And so we ask them to pray and ask the Lord to lay some money figure on their heart and make a promise or covenant with the Lord to do their very best to make that goal important to them. And so as a result, that's how we actually pay our missionaries that are on the mission field. And Emmalyn and her family were missionaries at one time, lifelong missionaries, as I understand. She was actually born on the mission field, and she was recommended to me by Pastor Tim, works at Lower Lights Ministries, which we love and support. And I thought she'd be a great addition to our Faith Promise weekend.
Wonderful. Well, since you've kind of teed it up for us, Emmalyn, if you would, kind of just take us back and walk us a little bit in your faith journey, kind of your background, where you come from, and how it is that you came to Central Ohio eventually.
Oh, yeah. It's always an interesting question when people ask me where I'm from, because I was born in Korea. And I love to mess with people. I tell them I'm from Grove City. They're like, no, really, where are you from? Well, okay, Grove City.
Well, actually, I am from Grove City.
Are you? Okay. Yeah. So I always tell people I was born literally into the church by accident. My parents are from Northwest Ohio. And so they went into the medical field. So my dad is, we both are retired now, but my dad went into X-ray, radiology, and my mom is a nurse. Both are retired from their fields. And when they were younger, probably elementary school, they went to a camp meeting, a Methodist camp meeting. They were raised Methodist. And at separate times, God had just called them to be missionaries. And so as they grew older, they never escaped. That call just never escaped them. And so they were high school sweethearts, got married. And then my dad came to college at OSU, and then they prepared to go to the mission field through the Church of the Nazarene. And they went over to serve in Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini. It's Southeast Africa. And fast fact, it is the only monarchy on the continent of Africa, which means it's the only country that has a king. And so they served there for 4 years. They went in the late 70s, mid 70s, and they weren't able to have kids. And so they thought about adoption, but they were in a developing world country. And so they weren't sure how it was going to happen, but it was providence of God. They got in contact. This was before technology, so it was like telegraphs. So for the younger generation, it was like typewriter, just a step up from the Morse code. So they got in contact with Nazarene missionaries in Korea, and who got in contact with Korean social welfare and started the adoption process for me. And I was adopted in 1977. It's truly an international adoption because they were living in Swaziland, and then they flew to Seoul to pick me up. And then it was around Christmas time, so then they flew to the United States for Christmas. So we'd have a Christmas with family, and then back to Swaziland. So they were halfway through their 4-year term. So I came midway into their 4-year term. And then what they didn't realize, and this is pretty common among couples, that infertility issues. My mom found out that she was pregnant, so my brother and I are 10 months apart. So he's biological, and we love to mess with people, so they dress us up alike, and people ask if we were twins. So we were married, or we finished out the term and then came back to the United States in Northwest Ohio, Lima area. My dad worked at the hospital there, and it was my brother and I. And my parents adopted my youngest brother, who's 7 years younger than my other brother and I. And then they got called back to the mission field, and they wanted through the Church of the Nazarene. So my dad helped start an X-ray training program at the hospital where they had been serving, which is Raleigh-Fitkin Memorial Hospital. It's in Manzini. It has since been nationalized, so the Church of the Nazarene doesn't operate it anymore. It was nationalized back to the Swazi government. And so for childhood, from 86 to 90, we went back. So my childhood, first early part of childhood, and then the latter part of, or midway through childhood, was spent there.
Now, one thing that I always find interesting, I've had the opportunity to talk to quite a few missionaries and missionary kids, is what felt like home to you during all those years? Was there a particular place that felt like home, or was it not a particular place?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll say this two-part answer. One is, this crazy little cliche, home is where your heart is. And so wherever, your family or family was. And it's funny because when people say, well, where's home for you? As time goes on, obviously Columbus, Ohio. But when I was younger, it's like, well, Wapakoneta was where I spent part of my childhood in Northwest Ohio. And then, Northwest Ohio or Swaziland, and then moving back to the States and came to Grove City. And really home was just wherever we were at the time. We were with our family and made it home. What I loved about growing up overseas, especially among the Nazarene, we lived on the largest mission station in the world, Nazarene mission station in the world. So not only was there a hospital, but there was an orphanage, teacher training, nurses training, just a number of different mission programs on this huge mission station. And so there was a lot of missionary families. And so it's a custom among MKs to call other family, instead of Mr. or Mrs. or by their first name, you call everybody auntie and uncle. So it cultivates that family. So like around the holidays, you would celebrate holidays with auntie and uncle, whomever. So it cultivated a sense of family among the mission family. So instead of just your immediate family, you have this whole extended mission family, your aunties and uncles, who is still keep in contact with after 30-some years.
Wow.
That's
fun.
great.
Yeah.
So we know a little bit about your family background. At some point, you're seeing all this ministry being done, and you're just kind of thrown into the middle of it. At what point, because we know that you're involved in ministry now, so how did you make that leap yourself? Like, at what point in your life did you say, it's not just something mom and dad do, but this is something like I have a personal faith? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Kind of my faith journey, and this was comforting because it's like I can't really pinpoint a time where I turned my heart over to Jesus and became a Christian type of a thing. It's like I've always known it. I've always known being in the church. Church was a good experience for me. I know it's not for some people, but I thank God my whole church upbringing has been good. I never set out to work in ministry. In fact, I really had no desire or inclination. In fact, so much so that I ran and took a ship to Tarsus. No, I'm kidding. I went to Olivet and graduated with a political science degree. And because political science is fun and it helps you watch C-SPAN and understand what the Electoral College is every 4 years.
Right.
Unless you want to perpetuate more political scientists in the world. I went to law school at Capitol. And so I wasn't really passionate about it, but it just seemed like, hey, that's probably what I should do since I have a political science degree. So I went from Olivet to Capitol. got a law degree. Didn't really practice per se, but worked in the corporate world for about 10 years. So I tell people I worked my way around the 270 outer belt with the different companies. And nobody really stays in corporate jobs for longer than 3 to 5 years. And that was kind of my trajectory. I think the longest place I stayed was 5 years, but for some reason, I just fell into the supply chain industry. And it was fun, fast paced. Again, not really passionate about it, but it was one of those things where I kind of fell into it. And I really think a lot of times for younger people, you want to think, what's God's will for your life, which is really code for what's the blueprint? What am I supposed to do next if you're not really sure? Mm-hmm. And so I just would go wherever doors open, headhunted to another company would go. It was fulfilling, but not really, I would say, a calling or a passion. And then a fateful moment, probably 15 years ago, a friend of mine said, we were in a women's group at church, and she said, hey, you should check out this place called Lower Lights Ministries. They have a program called Rachel's House for women coming out of prison, and with your human resources background, you'd be a great job coach. So I thought, well, I can try that out. So I checked it out, and little did I know that I was about ready to have my world turned upside down and rocked sideways.
Yeah.
I had grown up in the church, been part of church, served on church boards, taught small groups, done youth mentoring, but did all the good church type of things, and had probably more of an intellectual faith. Like as a younger person growing up, like apologetics and philosophy and that type of stuff. It was very head. My faith was nestled in my head, but it had not made its way into my heart. Mm-hmm. Not that I didn't have a relationship with God, but it was I never had a need for God much. Hadn't been through tragedy and
things
trauma.
Things were going pretty well.
Things were going well, making good money until started volunteering. And so that's not a plug to not volunteer, but it is a plug to you never know when the doors open what path God would lead to. And so when I started volunteering and realizing, hey, the world is not this sweet little contained, orderly, metaverse that I've been living in. There's a whole different world, and really being confronted with pain and suffering of people, starting to ask the questions like, wait a second, why did this happen to this person and not me? Or, those types. You start asking like the heavy duty questions, not the Sunday school type of questions that have cute, contained paragraph answers.
Right.
And that really started me on my real faith journey, and then ended up moving into one of the houses, Rachel's houses, to serve as a live-in house manager as a trial. I said I would do it for the summer, so I moved in June. I said, if it's not working out, I'll still be your rock star volunteer, but I can move out by Labor Day weekend. And I would say that was the beginning of my conversion experience. I said I was a Christian, but I wasn't converted until I moved in. And really, conversion, Martin Luther described conversion 3 ways: your conversion of your mind, your conversion of your heart, and the conversion of your money or your wallet.
Interesting.
And I totally believe that, because that's been my trajectory. When I say conversion, it's not necessarily I was a dirty, rotten sinner and then had this miraculous thrown off my horse light bolt experience. But it was more of a gradual of where I really started wrestling with, why do I believe this? But not in a deconstruction way, but more of a curiosity, like faith-seeking understanding. And for the last 13 years, it's really been a faith journey of the heart. And words like salvation, sanctification, all of the big theological words that I could talk and debate, ad nauseum about, really like, oh, this is for real. Like, this is purifying. Like, I am a steaming, flaming hot mess. I don't have my all together here.
Sure.
And realizing that serving in ministry and then leaving the corporate world and then serving in full-time ministry has really been a sanctifying experience. And I don't say it's a one and done. It's a process. In fact, I listen to a podcast every Monday morning called The Pastor's Table. It's facilitated by actually 2 former Nazarenes. And the one pastor said that God had to call him into the ministry in order to save him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? At first I laughed when I heard him say that, but I'm like, you know what? I think that might be true for me. Because it truly, not that I wouldn't be a follower of Christ, but to the degree and to the depth and the accountability has definitely been part of my journey.
That probably sounds foreign to some people because they always think that there's this, logical path, linear path that we follow where like we were raised a certain way and we believe certain things and then God. But really, when you look at some of the biblical accounts, when Jesus met Saul on the road to Damascus, at that moment, he was telling him, you're going to be preaching. Mm-hmm. So he was calling him and saving him at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it's not without precedent that something like that would happen. So tomorrow, we're going to get into kind of the work of what you're doing with Lower Lights and what all is going on with Lower Lights, because it's a big umbrella with a lot of ministries going into it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. So for today, though, we'll leave it there. Appreciate getting to know Emmalyn Jerome a little bit. And just a reminder that this coming Sunday, we have Faith Promise, and she's going to be speaking there. We also have a soup and salad event that's going on after services that she's also going to say a couple words there, and we're going to have some good food. So make sure you look on the website at shepnaz.org to sign up for that. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Emmalyn and for Sabrina, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.